This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Jill Newbronner and here are tonight's top stories from East Asia. South Korea blames management failures for Coupang's massive data leak as it releases the first findings from a probe into the breach at the US-listed e-commerce giant. Also in South Korea, authorities raid the country's spy agency, expanding a probe into the drone incursion into North Korea, initially focused on civilian suspects. A historic best showing for Japan's ruling party with a landslide win in the lower house election, empowering Sanae Takaichi to pursue her conservative agenda. We look into the significance. China doubles down on its national security law for Hong Kong, releasing a policy white paper a day after sentencing democracy activist and media tycoon Jimmy Lai to 20 years in jail. And a possible easing of tensions in the South China Sea. The Philippines says Manila and Beijing have both signaled a willingness to set aside differences to explore economic cooperation.
China is Indonesia's top market for seaweed exports. I'm Chami Batwani in South Sulawesi, and I'll have all the details on what's known as Indonesia's green gold.
South Korea has laid the blame for a massive data leak at e-commerce giant Coupang on management failures as it announces the first findings from a probe into the breach that has exposed more than 33 million accounts.
저희가 지금 인증체계 관리상의 문제점도 강하게 질타를 하고 지적을 했습니다. 그다음에 키 관리 시스템도 지금도 제대로 안 되고 있다는 부분도 정확하게 지적을 했습니다. 이거는 분명히 관리의 문제입니다. 지능화된 공격으로 보기는 어려울 것 같습니다.
CNA senior correspondent Lim Young-suk joins us live from Seoul with the latest. Now, Young-suk, what are some of the key findings that have come out from this joint probe?
Well, beyond that scale of the data breach, the Ministry of Science now says that it has uncovered deep internal failures inside Coupang. Now, the ministry confirmed that the attacker was not an outside hacker, but a former Coupang software developer who helped design this company's login system. Apparently, he used stolen security keys to enter the system without any IDs or passwords, making himself appear as a legitimate user. Now, the ministry also says that this probe also found serious security mismanagement. Access tokens were apparently not properly verified. Security keys were stored on developer computers. And even after the employee left the company, he still had access to critical systems. Now, the ministry also concluded that this was not a sophisticated cyber attack, but this was definitely a system and management failure. And it also found legal violations, including failures to protect evidence during the probe.
쿠팡은 자료 보전 명령에도 불구하고 자사 접속 기록의 자동 로그 저장 정책을 조정하지 않아 24년 7월부터 11월까지 약 5개월의 분량의 웹 접속 기록이 삭제되었습니다. 그리고 애플리케이션 접속 기록도 25년 5월 23일부터 6월 2일간의 데이터가 삭제되었습니다.
Now, the ministry also confirmed that this breach exposed not only Coupang users, but friends and family members through this delivery address records, meaning that, third-party personal data was also compromised. Now, authorities saying that this case is no longer just a cybersecurity incident, but, it does involve corporate accountability and also possibly criminal investigation.
Yeah, so talk to us a bit about the spillover effect. How is this case affecting South Korea's trade ties, for example, with the United States?
Well, yes, this case has now turned into this trade and diplomatic problem, not just a cybersecurity issue for South Korea, because Coupang is listed in the United States, in New York, and many politicians and government officials there in Washington apparently is seeing this as a crackdown on a U.S.-linked company. And so when South Korea started launching investigations and hearings on this case, apparently there were some U.S. politicians and investors claiming that South Korea was unfairly targeting an American firm. Now, that perception apparently has created this friction between the two countries, and U.S. officials have criticized South Korea's actions, saying that and that this issue has started appearing in the trade and diplomatic discussions between the two sides. In fact, South Korea's National Security Advisor Wi Sung-lak has said that this Coupang case was now affecting the broader trade and security relations with the United States. Now, in the midst of all of this, we have the United States raising pressure on South Korea, with U.S. President Donald Trump now threatening to increase tariffs on South Korean goods to 25%. Now, the Deputy U.S. Trade Representative Rick Switzer is scheduled to be holding talks with South Korean Trade Minister Yo Han-gu on Wednesday, and it's likely to be on the tariff hikes, though, it remains to be seen if this Coupang issue will be coming up. But there are analysts out there saying that they believe this pressure is connected to several disputes, including this Coupang case and other digital platform regulations that affect U.S. tech companies here in South Korea. And there are rising concerns that this Coupang case could, further strain bilateral ties, though we have the South Korean government the South Korean government saying that it has explained the situation to the U.S. side. It remains to be seen whether the U.S. side understands the South Korean position and will not cause more friction between the two sides.
All right, appreciate that. Senior correspondent Imang Suk, CNA's senior correspondent, reporting from Seoul there. Now, South Korean police have raided the country's spy agency as part of a probe into possible government links related to alleged drone flights into North Korea earlier this year. The Joint Military Police Investigation Task Force raided 18 locations of interest, including the Defense Intelligence Command and the National Intelligence Service. Authorities are investigating 3 active duty soldiers and 1 spy agency employee believed to be involved in the drone flights. 3 civilian suspects have been charged. Pyongyang accused the South Korean military of flying a drone into its territory last month. State media have released photos purportedly showing debris from a destroyed drone. Now, Seoul denied the government was involved, with President Lee Jae-myung saying it would be akin to, quote, firing a shot into the north. The Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi has pledged to deliver on her promises after an historic win by her Liberal Democratic Party in Sunday's polls. The LDP has 316 seats, securing a 2/3 supermajority on its own. This allows Ms. Takaichi's government to override the upper house and push for constitutional amendments. Coalition partner Japan Innovation Party won 36, giving the bloc 352 of the 465 seats in the chamber. The newly formed opposition party, Centrist Reform Alliance, suffered what they called an historical loss. The co-leaders, former Prime Minister Yoshihiko Noda and former Land Transport and Tourism Minister Tetsuo Saito, have since resigned. Well, despite Ms. Takaichi's pledge to boost female representation, the results saw the number of women in the powerful lower house falling to 68 seats, down from 73 elected in 2024. To weigh in, CNA's senior correspondent Michio Ishida joining us live from Tokyo. Michio, now that Ms. Takaichi has gotten the mandate that she asked for, she has to deliver, of course, but what hurdles could possibly stand in her way of her policy goals?
Well, Ms. Takaichi said earlier that her party was against her idea of reducing or lifting sales tax from the current 8% for food products, basically, and that is for 2 years. The LDP has stressed the importance of equal tax on everyone and support social welfare. So there's a difference of stance within the Liberal Democratic Party. But now with a strong mandate, she wants to hold a meeting with various political parties, and most of these parties support a sales tax reduction or its lifting. And she wants to come up with implementation measures by this summer. And we shall see if her party members will try to resist this sales tax lifting. But she did win the general election with a landslide victory. And her most important immediate task is to pass the financial year 2026 budget, which usually has to be legislated by the end of March. This is expected to be delayed as she called for a snap election. So she has to push this through. And that will actually not be so difficult with a strong majority in the powerful lower house of parliament.
Now, earlier I was speaking about the drop in female representation in the lower house. What does that signal?
Well, according to the Internal Affairs Ministry's data, the total number of candidates in this general election was 1,284. And of them, women made up 24.4%. It was actually the highest ratio for a general election. But the Liberal Democratic Party was one of the parties that fielded the least women, or 12.8% of the total. And Ms. Takaichi, as the president of the LDP, did not push for gender equality. But this did not come as a surprise, given she does not speak for women's empowerment. And overall, 14.6% were women who won a seat in the 465-member lower house. Now, the Japan Business Federation has been calling for the choice of separate surnames for married couples. Over 90% of Japanese women tend to choose their husband's surname. And there's been reports of loss of identity among women, a dent on their professional career by changing their surname. But Ms. Takaichi wants family names to be shared among couple for the unity of the family. And women can use their maiden name unofficially. Now, regarding imperial succession, Emperor Naruhito has a daughter, Princess Aiko. According to public opinion polls, there is support for a reigning empress. But Ms. Takaichi wants to preserve the tradition and allow only men to succeed the chrysanthemum throne. So the expectation is low for Ms. Takaichi to push for the empowerment of women. But if you look back in history, there were 8 reigning empresses.
Very interesting. Thank you so much, CNA senior correspondent Michio Ishida, reporting from Tokyo. Coming up on East Asia tonight, investors signaling confidence in the newly elected Japanese government as super long government bonds rally and equities hit fresh highs. A crypto exchange in South Korea accidentally gives away $43 billion worth of Bitcoin. How human error has exposed the structural flaw in the system. Welcome back, everyone. It's time for your business news, and Roland Lim is standing by for that. Now, Roland, the Japanese government bond yields are down today after Prime Minister Takaichi's win. What's the market saying about that?
Right. Japan's 40-year government bond yield declined for a 4th consecutive session, reaching its lowest point since January the 9th. Investors are saying that expectations for an early Bank of Japan interest rate hike have diminished. Japan's super long government bonds are rallying today, sending yields lower, meaning that it'll cost less for the government to borrow money. It's a sign that investors believe Prime Minister Takaichi's landslide election win will lower the risk of a near-term fiscal blowout. Japanese equities also pushing higher, with the Nikkei hitting fresh highs as those budget fears ease. Ms. Takaichi is still pushing tax relief, including a 2-year suspension of 8% food tax, but she says she won't issue fresh debt to pay for it. 40-year JGB yield fell to 8.7 basis points to 3.73%, while 30-year yield slipping 6.6 basis points. Analysts say it's a clear sign investors are buying the long end again. Even the benchmark 10-year yield dropped to 2.22%. One driver for the rally, foreign demand. Nomura says overseas investments have been scooping up long-dated bonds after last month's sell-off, and Japan's finance ministry data shows foreigners bought about 2 trillion yen, that's about $13 billion worth of JGBs in late January. That's the biggest weekly amount since April of last year. The Bank of America has nearly doubled its prediction for Taiwan's economic growth this year, moving it up to 8% from 4.5%. The firm says there's relentless global demand for the tech hardware that Taiwanese companies make. That plus a more stable currency and a trade deal with the US and spending by tech companies, all pointing to more growth for Taiwan. The island's biggest company, TSMC, has said that it's earmarking as much as $56 billion in capital spending, a projection that was stronger than anticipated. But Bank of America also highlighted risks from geopolitical dynamics. China sees the self-ruled island as part of its territory and has stepped up political and military pressure. Meanwhile, Taiwan's vice premier has pushed back on comments from U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick that he wants the island to move 40% of its chip-making capacity to the U.S. Ms. Young says she made it clear that it is impossible to do so. She says production capabilities on the island will continue to grow, while also expanding its presence in the U.S. Well, analysts say Washington's relocation plans are unfeasible, as Taiwan's semiconductor industry is already deeply integrated, and labor shortages and high production costs in the U.S. are obstacles. Geopolitical experts also say the island is using its semiconductor industry as a so-called silicon shield to deter, Chinese aggression. Now, TSMC defying concerns of an industry bubble and AI overspending, reporting robust sales in January. Revenue for the month grew 37% on year to $12.7 billion, surpassing the 30% revenue growth the firm expects for the full year. The contract chipmaker for NVIDIA is one of the biggest beneficiaries of a surge in AI-related investments. Hong Kong's chief executive says investors in the city are reviewing their stakes in Panama. This after the Supreme Court annulled a contract by Hong Kong-based CK Hutchison to operate 2 ports at the Panama Canal. John Lee says the ruling has undermined investor confidence. He says Hong Kong investments in Panama should be entitled to fair protection and has pledged to work with China to push back. Beijing has warned that Panama would, quote, pay a hefty political and economic price if it persisted in its course of action. Hutchison's subsidiary Panama Ports Company, or PPC, has taken the Panamanian state to arbitration, seeking extensive damages. The audit into PPC began last year after Donald Trump returned to the White House, vowing to take back the Panama Canal. The investigation found that the concession granted to PPC ran counter to Panama's national interest, and the contract was declared unconstitutional last month. China's brutal auto price war has taken a heavy toll, wiping out tens of billions of dollars in industry revenue and forcing Beijing to step in. New research estimates that China's auto industry lost more than 470 billion yuan. That's about $68 billion over the past 3 years as car makers slashed prices to compete. The price war began in early 2023 after Tesla kicked off deep discounts, forcing domestic and foreign rivals to follow suit. Average vehicle prices fell 11%, reshaping competition and squeezing margins across the industry. The aggressive discounting drew Beijing's attention. Regulators last year warned car makers against destructive price cuts and unpaid supplier bills. Analysts now expect fewer outright price cuts in 2026 as companies pivot to financing incentives, feature upgrades, and new model launches, accelerating consolidation in China's auto sector. Market action now. Asian markets on the front foot since early trade, with major indices having another rally today. The so-called Takaichi trade shaping up sentiment in Japan following the record election win over the weekend. Equities higher, the yen is slightly strong against the greenback, also by 0.44%, 155.17 to the dollar. And the 30-year JGB bill yield, well, it is down 5.2 basis points. In Seoul, the Kospi index is also marginally higher. Tech giants such as Samsung and SK Hynix, they're tracking their US peers higher, following the recovery of AI-related shares on Wall Street. Taiwan weighted index also up 2%. Quick check on the Greater China markets. It's in risk-on mode after 2 sessions of sell-off. Shanghai Composite ending the day slightly above water, 4,125 points. Shenzhen also just marginally higher, and the Hang Seng Index adding 1% thanks to pharma and biotech counters leading the gains. Canada and Japan deepening ties across multiple fronts from trade to defense. CNA spoke to Canadian Minister of International Trade Maninder Sidhu, who sees growing opportunities with Tokyo in their long-standing partnership.
There's a lot that's going on between Canada and Japan, especially around defense, around agri-foods, agriculture. There's a lot of collaboration there, and you see the trade, bilateral trade between Canada and Japan growing every year incrementally, and so we're going to continue with that relationship in terms of Canada and Japan. There's a lot of opportunities, especially as technologies emerge. Critical minerals is important to Japan. The conversation with Japan is around getting reliable critical mineral supply chains, and so Canada plays a key role. As you know, we're resource rich, and so those conversations will continue to happen. As you know, defense spending, especially in Japan, is ramping up. In Canada as well, we're investing $81 billion. It's a record. We've never invested this much since the 1950s. And so you can imagine the industrial benefits that we're having, but the conversations that we're having along with our counterparts in Japan are around mining, are around defense, are around agriculture, but even energy. LNG plays a key role in our relationship, especially with Japan.
Mr. Sidhu is also looking to diversify markets beyond the US and turning to countries, including China.
I was with the Prime Minister Carney in China a few weeks ago, where we had a great discussion to explore areas of collaboration, but also to work through tariff challenges. Making sure that we have access for our agriculture sector, and we were successful. $7 billion worth of agriculture goods will now flow to China at a lower tariff rate. We discussed electric vehicles, as you know, and so we're now allowing up to 49,000 vehicles from China, electric vehicles, with hopefully Chinese manufacturers coming to Canada and joint ventures and manufacturing those vehicles in Canada. We talked about energy, we talk about agriculture, but also tourism, but also the Chinese welcome investments in aerospace, and again, agriculture and consumer goods. And so there's areas that we're going to collaborate in. Of course, we're going in with eyes wide open with a practical approach of where we want to continue to engage with China.
South Korea's financial regulators have launched a full investigation into Bithumb after the crypto exchange accidentally gave away more than $40 billion worth of Bitcoin last week as part of a promotion. Authorities want tougher rules, calling this a serious matter that could undermine market order. South Korea's second biggest crypto exchange was planning to give a cash reward of 2,000 Korean won worth of Bitcoin, but gave each winner instead 2,000 Bitcoins. Now, of the 620,000 Bitcoins given away, more than 99% have been retrieved by the exchange. And those who have already sold the Bitcoin are legally obliged to return them to Bithumb. But regulators say the episode has exposed a structural flaw. According to Bithumb's report last year, the exchange held only about 43,000 Bitcoins. And that means the payout exceeded its actual holdings by around 14 times. Authorities want to resolve the issue of the so-called phantom coin so that they can bring digital assets under regulatory control. And that'll do it for business. Jill, it's back to you.
All right, thanks so much, Roland. Coming up on East Asia tonight, Japanese Prime Minister has won an election gambit, receiving a supermajority in the lower house. An expert joins us in the studio to tell us how Sanae Takaichi will make use of that mandate to push her policies. And China releases a policy white paper on Hong Kong's national security, just a day after sentencing former media tycoon Jimmy Lai to 20 years in jail. Welcome back. This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. South Korea lays the blame for Coupang's massive data leak on the e-commerce giant's management failures as it reveals the first findings from a probe into the breach. Also in South Korea, authorities raid the country's spy agency and more than a dozen other government offices, expanding a probe into a drone incursion into North Korea, initially focused on civilian suspects. And China calls on concrete action from Sanae Takaichi to demonstrate her sincerity after the Japanese Prime Minister and Tokyo were open to dialogues with Beijing following her party's landslide election win. Now we're going to stay in Japan for more insights into Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's leadership. And for that, we're joined by Tamuro Kotaro. He is adjunct professor at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy and U.S. Welcome, Professor. Now, I got to ask you first, because you have known the Prime Minister personally for, 3 decades now? You worked together in the first Abe administration, I understand. So from what you know of her and understand of her character and what does she bring to the role of Prime Minister at a very historic but still unstable time for Japan?
Yeah, I want to say first, she always sounding like a right-wing and a spending person. But I don't feel like that since I met her, more than 30 years ago. So experience the influential politician in LDP evolve itself. She keep changing in a good way. Her campaign pledge, her philosophy on economic policy, fiscal policy, and also defense policy. So he sounds like a right wing, but it's the same thing can be said to the Prime Minister Abe. Said to be a right wing, but what he did is something like a liberal. So she is very flexible. So you don't need to expect what everybody said in the campaign pledge. So I don't think she will execute everything, but she is now in the safety driving mode. She's not hawkish to China. She understands People's Congress is coming in next month, so China cannot be nice to her. But two countries want to improve the relationship. Yeah. And she's visiting D.C., and she's carrying a nice souvenir, a lot of numbers, stronger wing compared to the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Yeah. So President Trump likes the strong leader and the successor of the Shinzo Abe. So she can get a better deal with President Trump, I think.
Yeah, so she has the political muscle now after the elections, but as you mentioned, she's still got that flexibility that you said to work that into her role. So I want to bring that into one of the first things that she has said that she wants to do, and that is revise Japan's 3 key security documents. Now, in practical terms, what would change about the way Japan defends itself?
So she's very pragmatic. So the security landscape surrounding Japan is changing dramatically since the beginning of this year, especially. And as a matter of fact, it's getting worse. So Japan is surrounded by 3 authoritarian states carrying nuclear weapons. And the U.S. is showing aggression even to the allies, like Greenland, Denmark, Mexico, Canada. So this is an election year for President Trump. Anything can happen. So she gets frightened when U.S. first attacked Venezuela. So anything can happen to Japan. So she planned U.S. visit before the snap election, calling snap election. But she understands we need to have an election, we need to big win. Otherwise, we cannot cut the deal with Trump, and maybe Trump might slap our face. So that's the concern, and that's why she tried to cut the deal with Trump and the changing defense policies in a way dramatically, including nuclear principles. And she's ready to pay more, to buy more weapons from U.S.
That's a good point, because as you mentioned, she is also pushing for an increase in defense spending, right? Where is that money going to go? If you said that defense is going to be changing revolutionarily, where's that money going? Missiles, cyber intelligence, where?
Definitely missiles, Tomahawk missiles. We need to buy 10 times more Tomahawk missiles for the standing preliminary attacking capabilities, because we are too near to our neighbors using supersonic missiles. But at the same time, we need to pour more money into Japan's defense tech. because AI, sovereign AI, we need to build. Because relying too much on the US AI, that means giving all defense data to the US and giving up your autonomy in your defense. So I think she will do a good job getting more autonomy from the US because we are kind of subcontractors for the US military base in the country. But she tried to, okay, if you push me to pay more, give me more authority, give me more autonomy.
Is that why she's also trying to strengthen the intelligence cooperation with the US while introducing this anti-espionage law, for example? Is that what's going on here?
And Japan is building Japan's version of CIA, so spies. So, intelligence is necessary, and Japan is trying to make Japan's GPS, the, satellite constellation. Because, if US doesn't like us, they will keep the GPS, they will stop the AI. So that's why. That's the only way, in a sense, threatening US to keep US influence in the region. Yeah.
Okay, let's shift it a little bit because we just heard in our story that China mentioned that they want the Japanese Prime Minister to show sincerity, towards their relationship. Relationships are already tense with Takaichi's hawkish stance. Where do you anticipate this relationship will progress?
We understand that, Chinese leader cannot be flexible to us because the economy is not good. So only his legitimacy is showing strength. That China is a strong country. So we never back down to any neighbors, including US. So we understand that People's Congress is coming. So he has no choice other than, try to aggressive to us. We understand. But Takaichi-san will send a message because we are contentious, but at the same time, we are relying each other, technology-wise and business-wise. We understand that. And the US might be doing grand bargaining with China. Recent comment done by President Trump, that's also frightening us. They might shake hands,
So you're saying, if I'm hearing you right, you're saying that with China at least, there is some sort of room for a pragmatic relationship or even de-escalation?
Yes.
Yeah?
Because China always threatening, the rare earths. We are cutting supply of rare earths. But I'm pretty sure that they don't do it because they rely on our technologies. Key components of the, high tech in China using, humanoid or the space. So key components are coming only from Japan. They cannot copy that. So we are interdependent.
I hope you're right, because if Beijing relations actually get worse, this could actually very quickly, support could turn into pressure for her. I'm wondering about your thoughts to another nearby neighbor, South Korea. Can security cooperation deepen under this new prime minister, despite very long-running historical and political disputes?
I think, there's a possibility, and we understand each other. So we understand Korean situation. Their economy is more dependent on China, and they are connected to North Korea and China, sharing border. So we are island nations. Our, viewpoint is, our perspective is not the same. We understand. But, at least there's a huge room for us to come together to set up, mutual defense on the, three difficult neighbors, authoritarian neighbors carrying atomic weapons.
Okay, just a final question. Let's turn it into Japan itself, where it's got a situation where it needs a lot of workers, but Takaichi is taking quite a tough line on immigration. How do you balance the need for workers, but the tough immigration line?
Yeah, actually, we are learning a lot from Singapore, control immigration. So you are such a diverse country, but very peaceful, but very safe and productive. So your way of taking people from outside, that's the best example. Not Europe, not US, I think Singapore. And the Japanese government understand that. They're studying carefully your case a lot.
All right. Well, very interesting to have you with us, Professor.
Thank you.
And thank you for your insight into this topic.
Pleasure.
I've been speaking there with Tamura Kotaro, adjunct professor at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, NUS. Now, China has released a policy white paper on safeguarding national security in Hong Kong. It comes a day after former media tycoon Jimmy Lai was sentenced to 20 years in prison under the city's national security law. In the document, Beijing says the city will continue to strengthen its legal system, stressing it as, quote, fundamental responsibility for national security affairs in the financial hub. Jimmy Lai received the heaviest sentence so far among high-profile government critics charged under Beijing's national security law. Critics have said the security law has been used to clamp down on dissent, but the paper describes the law as a legal shield aimed at neutralizing threats and restoring order. Hong Kong leader John Lee welcomed the white paper, saying authorities must remain vigilant against security risks. He added Mr. Lai's sentence was deserved and that it sent a solemn warning against the collusion with foreign forces.
He caused damage to the interests of the country and the Hong Kong SAR. His conviction is supported by overwhelming evidence, and he deserves the punishment after all the harm that he has done.
The media mogul's sentence has drawn international criticism from countries and rights groups. U.S. President Donald Trump and Britain's government under Prime Minister Keir Starmer have both called for his release. The United Nations Human Rights Chief Volker Turk also deplored the sentence, describing it as incompatible with international law. The Philippines has underscored the need to ease tensions with China over long-standing issues in the South China Sea after both sides signaled a willingness to deepen cooperation in other areas, including the economic front. The Philippine ambassador to Washington added that Manila's relations with Beijing is not solely defined by ongoing maritime tensions, even as it continues to call out any unlawful actions. In recent years, both China and the Philippines have been locked in a series of confrontations in regional waters amid disputed territorial claims. Additionally, the Philippines, which is the ASEAN chair this year, is looking to secure China's full engagement to conclude a long-delayed code of conduct in the South China Sea. Now, China's foreign ministry said there is mutual interest on building cooperation between both sides.
近日，中非外交部官员在菲律宾宿务举行了双边会见，就涉海等共同关心的问题，坦诚深入交换了意见。 双方同意继续通过外交渠道保持沟通，妥善处理涉海分歧，管控好海上局势。
Chinese police are probing the deaths of 7 gold mine workers after an accident at a site owned by leading gold producer Zhaojing Mining Industry. State media CCTV says a cage fell down a mine shaft on Saturday at the Changchuang gold mine in China's eastern Shandong province. 11 people, including the manager of the mine and those in charge of safety, have been detained. Authorities are looking into the cause amid allegations of a cover-up. Reports say officials were only notified of the deaths after receiving a report on Monday. China, in recent years, has stepped up its monitoring of mine safety, prompted by a series of deadly incidents in the coal and metals sector. The news weighing down shares of Zhaojing Mining. They fell by nearly 9% in Hong Kong before ending the day about 6% in the red. Still to come on East Asia tonight, China's top diplomat lays out the country's priorities as it prepares to host the APEC summit this year. And tradition in South Korea takes a deep dive this Lunar New Year. Indonesia's booming seaweed industry generated more than $260 million in exports from January to October last year. And more than 80% of that harvest went to China, its top market for the past decade. But this heavy reliance carries risks for the industry, as CNA's Chatni Bhavani reports in the series on Indonesia's green gold.
Sites like these are common along the coastlines of Takalar Regency, a seaweed industrial area in South Sulawesi, Indonesia's top seaweed-producing province. Often referred to as green gold, seaweed is one of Indonesia's leading commodities, and China has been its top export market for more than a decade.
Yang paling dominan itu adalah ke Tiongkok, ke China. Itu ke Tiongkok itu terutama untuk jenis rumput laut yang raw material, jadi dalam bentuk kering.
This local warehouse exports a variety of dried seaweed to Vietnam, the Philippines, Chile, and Spain. But 90% of its stocks go to China.
Sebenarnya tantangan terbesar yang di kami itu sebenarnya dari masalah harga. Soalnya kan rumput laut itu fluktuatif kan dia harganya. Terus bahan baku yang memang berkualitas. Jadi kan terkadang kita butuhnya bahan baku yang berkualitas tinggi agar supaya cost kita nggak bertambah untuk mau prosesnya lagi. Jadi itu yang masih tantangannya. Terus untuk lagi dari segi penjualan memang saat ini kita ingin berharap bukan China juga yang kita supply.
Diversifying markets is exactly what this factory is doing. They regularly ship to Chile and Spain and are currently exploring the UK market. Selling to a wider range of countries also help these businesses lower the risks that comes with over-reliance.
Harga yang ke China dengan ke Eropa tentunya berbeda. Eropa mungkin lebih sedikit agak menarik dibandingkan China karena memang kami tahu persis kalau di China kan banyak pabrik yang sejenis, tentunya harga tentu bersaing juga.
While Indonesia supplies the raw material, China leads the global processing sector. A dominance that's evident in South Sulawesi, where Chinese manufacturer BLG built a factory to produce seaweed byproducts such as carrageenan. Carrageenan is a gelling, thickening, and stabilizing agent extracted from red seaweed. It is used in food, cosmetics, and pharmaceuticals.
Seaweed processing factories typically have labs like this. Prior to being processed into carrageenan, the seaweed must be tested for viscosity, gel strength, pH level, and moisture content. Food-grade carrageenan must also be tested for its total plaque count.
Industry players say limited investment in research and development is a key reason Indonesia's seaweed industry lags behind processing powerhouses such as China and Japan.
Kekurangan di kami di industri dalam negeri itu alokasi R&D sangat kecil. Jadi mungkin karena base-nya awalnya dari pedagang ya, terus masuk ke industri. Sangat berbeda. Saya hampir tiap tahun sebelum COVID itu boleh dikata keliling ke teman-teman, ya termasuk di kantor pusat BLG. Saya melihat lab-nya, segala rupa penelitian mereka. Jadi mereka mengambil produk-produk yang ada di pasaran, kemudian membentuk grup-grup kecil, itu ada diteliti bagaimana supaya produk itu bisa masuk terformulasi di produk tersebut, baik makanan maupun minuman. Di Jepang juga sama.
Authorities say barely 12% of Indonesia's total seaweed cultivation potential is currently utilized, and Indonesia is looking to significantly develop this.
Pandangan kami industri rumput laut sebuah langkah menarik sebenarnya, apalagi dengan isu hilirisasi dari pemerintah. Hanya saja memang bagaimana bangunan ekosistem ini bisa menjadi terkoneksi antara satu fase dengan fase yang lain.
As Indonesia looks to maximize the potential of its fast-growing seaweed sector, industry players say more needs to be done if Indonesia is to effectively compete and succeed on the global stage. Chandni Vatwani, CNA, South Sulawesi, Indonesia.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi called for unilateralism and urged countries to protect multilateral trade arrangements as he laid out priorities for APEC 2026. He was addressing delegates at the first senior officials meeting in China's southern coastal province of Guangdong, beginning a series of formal meetings for the year. Deborah Wong reports.
Openness is the lifeline of the APEC economy, paving the way for peace and stability in the region. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's message at the first formal APEC meeting in the country underlines China's push for free trade at a time of rising protectionism.
我们看到当今世界进入新的动荡变革期，亚太发展面临的挑战也在增多，单边主义、保护主义蔓延，世界经济碎片化加剧， 区域经济一体化遭遇逆风。在此背景下，中方第3次担任 APEC 东道主，深感责任重大。
China hosted APEC in 2001 in Shanghai and again in Beijing in 2014. And later this year, the Leaders' Summit will be held in the country's tech hub of Shenzhen. The city lies in Guangdong, China's most prosperous province. Trade remains a key focus for China. In 2025, trade surplus exceeded an eye-catching $1 trillion, buffering the economy against weakness in the domestic market. But China now wants to work towards a more balanced trade. In fact, just last month, Premier Li Qiang called for an expansion of imports during a work visit here in this province. At this first APEC senior officials meeting, Mr. Wang has said member countries should strengthen community building, improve consensus on trade and investments, and increase support for developing economies so that vulnerable parties don't get left behind. China also aims to accelerate new areas of cooperation in the digital space, green economy, and AI. Delegates from the US and Japan were present earlier and indicated that lines of communication remain open amid ongoing friction. Now, the US delegation had earlier said they plan to promote US exports as well as restore a level playing field for American companies. Deborah Wong, CNA, Guangzhou.
I want to take you to South Korea next, where divers in one aquarium are donning the traditional Korean hanbok, or Korean dress, in a very unique performance ahead of next week's Lunar New Year. We'll have a look there. Aside from swimming with their fishy friends there, a feeding session was also part of the underwater showcase as they delivered the New Year's greetings to visitors. The performance was held inside this massive tank and could hold 2,000 tons of water. Now, we all know that in the Chinese zodiac, the year of the horse begins on the 17th of February. So the occasion is celebrated all across South Korea, China, as well as parts of Southeast Asia.
설 명절 연휴 맞이해서 애기랑 밖에 바람 쐬고 싶어서 나와봤는데 정말 수중 공연 처음 봐서 그런지 애기가 너무 좋아하고 또 새해 복 많이 받으세요 이렇게 알려주시니까 되게 기쁘더라고요.
이 나이 또래에 이런 물고기다 보면 되게 정서에 좋대요. 그래서 같이 왔는데 애기들도 박수치고 즐기는 거 보니까 같이 오길 잘했다 생각도 들기도 하고 이제 애기들 다 건강하게 밝게 자랐으면 좋겠습니다. 네.
And that is Tuesday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget headlines anytime at cna.asia. Plus check us out on Facebook and YouTube as well. Bye-bye.